Thank you very much indeed, Gary. I'd like to welcome Bruce Hopkins from Vodafone. He's the Technical Security Manager and is going to chat to us about the practical application of 27001. He's a background in security risk management, continuity and disaster recovery, and prior to Vodafone, who I think you've been with for 10 years, you were involved in the consultancy sector.
Yep. Good morning. I think after all that electrons, photons, hacking and cracking of targets, I think I'll just calm things down a little bit and we'll talk about ISO 27001. As I said, my background, I've been in Vodafone for a number of years, so I'll just give a very quick introduction to the company. Most people would have I would know somebody who has some interaction with Vodafone as one of the mobile phone companies. What a lot of people mightn't be aware is that over the last 5 or 6 years, we've acquired both globally with cable and wireless acquisition, and locally, the three fixed line telcos have been integrated into Vodafone's business. So we're now much more of a total comms provider. Based on the fact that we're part of a global family with the Vodafone Group based in London, we have shared services centres in India and Hungary now providing backup services, back office. We have 3 data centres in Europe providing support to our IT infrastructure. One of those data centres, we're very proud to say, is in Dublin, not too far from this part of the city. And it was during the dot-com boom, I suppose. It was one of the big American organizations. And we managed to acquire the data center about 10 years ago, and it subsequently became one of our 3 key global sites. So moving on, I'll start off with a little bit of background in terms of, well, why did Vodafone get involved with ISO certification? What's in it for us? One of the things that I think anyone who's considering moving towards certification, it's a question that obviously has to be asked within the organization is you can put in policies, procedures, do various things. Do we need to certify? So we have 2 certifications in place. I'm responsible at the moment for managing both of those certifications. One has been in for 10 years now. 2006 we certified under 20,000 for service management. So basically we deliver services. Our driver in terms of our business is delivering services to customers throughout the country. Making sure that those services are available and are effective is one of our top priorities. 20,000 helps us do that and helps us do it in a structured way. It helps us measure ourselves. The same thing applies to some degree in terms of this information security. It's a more recent certification. It's a more recent development for us. It's a project which we started off over the last couple of years, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. We have, for consumers, let's say, enterprise aside, over 2 million people in Ireland give us data when they set up a phone account for a mobile phone. And that means that we are the guardians, we have to look after that, and that is absolutely vital for our business that we maintain and manage that properly. Our customers expect that, so there's a level of trust. We're entrusted with that data. We have to do everything we can to make sure that we look after it. So basically, improved security means better quality services, and all of these things are dedicated to how the customer experiences Vodafone services. So better customer experience is our end goal in anything that we do. The benefits for the business, obviously people like myself would have been doing something of a sales pitch over the last number of years to get the business. He said business sponsorship, get business people online. We would talk about the fact that we're being audited by large customers, and these audits cost money. A big customer, a global business comes into Vodafone and says we want Vodafone in 12 countries. They would send people out to 12 countries to do audits. They don't need to do that if we can provide assurance on the standards that we can meet. So that enables us to highlight the best-in-class security that we can implement if we have it in place. The certification is a big benefit in doing that in terms of you hand over a piece of paper that says, look, we have a certificate. If you want to come and audit us, feel free, but this demonstrates what we do and we can make audit reports available based on that. So that helps. That means that we don't have people flying in from Germany or from the States or wherever to do an audit on our business. It saves the customer money, makes it easier for them to interact, it saves us time and money. The certification is a requirement, particularly in Ireland nowadays. A lot of the public service and a lot of large companies, they require that their suppliers would have certification. So obviously that's really just a compliance step, but it's an overall benefit. So one of the key elements of both 20,000 and 27,001 is the fact that it hangs both on risk assessment, risk management, and on continuous improvement as processes. So that helps us to build not just on the security side, not just on our call centres and our business-facing teams, but also throughout the IT operations, network operations in a telecoms company, this whole concept of a continuous improvement culture. And that is something that over a number of years, it does become a business as usual. It does become ingrained in the organisation, and it really does help. It helps us to understand what the challenges are to our business and to have a level of plans in place. To continuously improve means you're moving up that maturity scale. We looked at a maturity scale earlier on. As you move toward more mature processes, you get easier access to information, you get better understanding amongst teams, and that then is easier to communicate up to senior management to make sure the management understand what you're trying to do. So where do we start? Another Star Wars reference thrown in here. A long time ago, basically, is the story is it takes time to implement. We would have started, say, 10 years ago on the 20,000. I wasn't directly involved in that, we came in afterwards, but the benefit of the 20,000 is that security is a process, a named process within 20,000. So therefore, if you want to start somewhere with your security, the place to start, if you have a certification, is to embed it in there, and then to work and see where do you go from here in terms of the continuous improvement. So again, go back to basics then, where do you really start? If I was starting today, so when we kind of reset and re-engineered the entire security setup, my circles have gone a bit oval there. Basically looking at risk and threat assessment. So risk assessment we mentioned by a number of speakers earlier on. It is absolutely fundamental to the whole picture. If you have a strong risk assessment process and you understand what your threats are, then you can communicate and you can justify the investment required to manage those risks. So basically, the way we would look at it would be that in order to understand the risks, we need to understand the assets that our business has, the threats to those assets. What kind of business are you? What are the threats that your business faces? It's actually an interesting question for a company like Vodafone to ask that. We regularly ask ourselves, what kind of business are we? Because you will get different opinions if you ask different people. A lot of people would say, if you did a Vox Pop in Grafton Street, where the phone shop is, you'd get, well, you're a mobile phone shop. There it is there. You're a mobile phone company. We're a utility, we're a retail organisation. I think we're one of the top 15 retail organisations in Europe by sales. So that means we're a chain of shops. If you look at our traffic, over 50% of our traffic delivery to mobile handsets is video. So we're actually a video content delivery company. We're not a phone company at all. The level of it, we measure everything nowadays in data because most of our voice is transferred in data form at some point. By volume, data, our voice is now a tiny proportion of what we actually do, even though the vast majority of customers would just think in terms of phone calls. So when we start our assessment, that's where we're going. We look at obviously this is the basics will be our confidentiality, integrity, availability. So look at your risks, look at where you're going with your risks, look at the activities in an organisation. So this would be for any, this is kind of, I'm taking the Vodafone picture and generalising in terms of how you look at it. So what activities does your organisation get engaged with? Once you have a clear view of all the assets, and by assets, you generally mean everything from buildings, infrastructure, applications, people. But there would be one area where I would draw attention to applications. The reason I've highlighted that is because one of the things we've done in terms of the actual certification process, there are some quasi-legalistic things you need to do to certify. One of them is you need to have an asset register. So, and an asset register can be a challenge for an organisation like Vodafone with a huge data centre in 3 different countries and all our network infrastructure throughout the country. This is not easy, but one of the things we've done is as part of our project, we looked at this and we figured out, working with our external auditors and working with our an implementation partner as part of the project, applications are what we list on our asset register. Those applications are linked, and this goes back to why was 20,000 very useful. We already were able to link applications back to infrastructure, IP addresses, locations in the data center. That's all taken care of under 20,000. So all we have to do from the point of view of the asset register for security was look at the applications. Applications, if you include your databases and various things in there, you've captured all of the areas where your business either processes or stores data. If they're all captured on your asset register, you've got a good start. So that's the approach we took to that was applications. So you go through products and services, you go through your processes, your assets, and most importantly, the case study earlier on we looked at with Target. Target could have had clean, shiny security right throughout their entire organisation, but the guys looking after the air conditioning were the problem. That means third-party management is vital. You wouldn't normally think of checking up on your, sort of a mech and elec provider. You wouldn't necessarily, you'd think, oh, have you got people doing IT outsourcing? That's important. The guys looking after the aircon, doesn't matter. But then they're the kind of people who do have access to systems, they do have access to applications, they would have remote maintenance. We actually had very early, when I was only a couple of years in Vodafone, maybe a year, you may remember in the dim and distant past, the Bluetooth virus, when Bluetooth first came out, Bluetooth virus was a hot topic for a while. We all thought these were going to take over the world and destroy telecommunications infrastructure. It never happened. But we did have one incident in our headquarters down in Sandyford where we had a Bluetooth virus that spread throughout the building one particular day. It was one of the first incident response things that I'd worked on. It was kind of one of these bizarre, people were seeing this traffic on their phones, and it was Bluetooth had only come out about a year or so. Everybody had a new phone. 3G was just being launched, and we all had new phones with Bluetooth on them. And it was the guy who was checking the air conditioning. One guy walked the whole way around the building checking every aircon unit, and therefore managed to create alerts in about 150 phones in 2.5 hours. And that was, I mean, it wasn't a real security incident because nobody actually lost any data or was compromised in any way, but it was a great sales pitch for us in security. We secured our following year's budget straight off the bat with just the Bluetooth virus. It was like, oh, that could have been bad. Now, we didn't oversell it, obviously, but at the same time, it was an indication of the strangest thing can occur in an organisation and lead to, all the way to the CEO talking about, what the hell is Bluetooth? What the hell is Bluetooth virus? How does that work? So as a general point then, where we break down our risks, now I would also have a role in risk management, so as part of the 27,000. The big ticket areas, most of you, if you're in the security game, these will all be the kind of the high level. We talked about cyber attack earlier on. It was one of our key risks. This would break down to about 10 or 12 more detailed items in a risk register. And we would map this then back to to our statement of applicability, which was mentioned. I don't want to get too technical on ISO, but if you're getting into it, the statement of applicability is important. Risks map to controls. Controls are all detailed in the standard, and that should be mapped into your statement of applicability. Cyber attack, where you have technical vulnerabilities, they may lead to an attack. Weaknesses in identity management, authentication, authorization, accounting, the AAA, they are so commonplace in organizations. And if a cyber attack is only going to get so far unless you've got the AAA weaknesses. And the thing with the target talking about somebody getting access to logins, it's basically a AAA weakness. Data privacy breaches, while we're not responsible for data privacy in terms of ISO, the weaknesses that occur that lead to breaches are invariably either process or technical security controls. So there's something that we're always very mindful of. And then for big companies, and it really depends on the nature. Vodafone, it's great to be part of a big global family with Vodafone. One of the downsides is that every so often somebody attacks a Vodafone company and a little typo in their script and they actually attacking Ireland by mistake. So UK, for some reason, is an extremely popular target. Advanced persistent threats are constantly banging on the doors of Vodafone UK. Every so often they spill over and we get a bit, so we've got to be very careful. We also use some of the same infrastructure in terms of cyber defence operations, which is based both in the UK and in Germany. So these are areas where, while every day of the week it's not an APT day in Vodafone Ireland, we've got to be very, very careful because we are part of a larger target and therefore we need to be mindful of that at all times. The journey to certification, so how do we actually go about it? So this going back, I mentioned previously that, I think my slide has gone a bit strange here. The early days, assembling the tools, putting the basics together, alignment to the ISO 20000. This is going back over about 5 years ago. We would have certified security under 20000. Continuous improvement, making sure that we get all the basic controls in place. There was a mention of the 114 controls. We then got together with a partner organisation. You might see, if you're out later on, there's a gentleman called Sean Rooney out there in the Integrity stand. Sean he's the managing director of Integrity. He worked with us for a period of time. We had a project, I managed a project where we looked at every one of the 114 controls and we assessed ourselves against this and then went through the certification process. It only took us 9 months to do the full certification because we'd spent the previous 2-3 years doing the groundwork. So as governance, risk management, we mentioned a number of times. You can't say it enough times that if you've got good risk processes, then you're in a good place. So we would put this under the heading of overall governance. So by governance, simple statement, demonstration of commitment to control by the organisation's leadership. Keyword there, leadership. You have to have support, as we mentioned before. If your CEO doesn't care about ISO and doesn't care about security, you're in trouble before you get going. So we have focus. I have to go in and present into our SLT on a regular basis. How are you doing? What's going on in security? We have 3 different security teams who all contribute to different areas, and the ISO pulls it all together. So it's an area where we're constantly working on what are the risks. Do we have CapEx planning linked back to risk, linked back to your ISO controls? And what's the end game on your project? Our 9 months was spent actually building an ISMS based on all of the existing bits and pieces. We'll put it all together. There's a discussion about SharePoint, I think, as part of this one-day event, and SharePoint plays a key role in what we've done. And effectively what we built was, we say, an ISMS, a compliant. So what's in it? Very briefly, without getting into too much detail, the red layers up the top is your governance. This is how we break down governance, how we implement it. And then the blue bar down the bottom, basically your 114 security controls. They group into, you've kind of got about sort of 8 or 10 groups of controls if you actually group them together. So it's not as bad as 114 sounds. We do look and review each one of the 114 at least twice a year, just to make sure our groupings are correct, just to make sure we haven't missed a trick, that the market has moved, that our business has changed, we might have acquired another organisation, we might have another partner, another outsourcing process in place. But the most important thing is making sure your framework is right, your documentation is simple and clear. We don't have 114 documents. We have about 12 to 15 documents that would be our key ISMS. So if I want to communicate to somebody and say, what do I need to read to understand your ISMS? 2 documents. The framework and the policy. Everything else is linked through to those and referenced from those. So if you read 2 documents, 2 hours, you've got a handle on our ISMS. The work that needs to go underneath that, obviously, with your risk management, your treatment, training and awareness, and as I said before, the continuous improvement, that needs to keep going. That's business as usual processes, all hanging off a governance group, which is small. We would have the 3 heads of security, we would have head of IT, head of operations getting together regularly. We keep it tight. We present to other leadership, but we don't bring them all in and have big committee meetings. We have small, tight groups of 3 or 4 people who would meet regularly. We have, our steerco would be basically every 2 weeks. So it used to be once a month, but we never got through the agenda, so we had to make it every 2 weeks. Sometimes it's every week if we're having a busy period. So finally, just going to mention a couple of things. Communications, it's an ongoing struggle in any organisation to make sure you explain. You have to keep explaining. Organisations change, people come, people go, people change roles. You have to keep selling. You have to keep describing what you're doing, keep explaining what we're doing. We try and keep it really simple. I'm just going to end with a couple of very simple messages that we would put up. This is almost a security cliche, I think, at this point. You're only as strong as the weakest link. But we do emphasise in talking to people that, and this figure has been reviewed a number of times, and we always come back to it. The majority, it's between 60 and 80, depends on who you ask. The majority of problems that occur inside organisations, and we are no exception, are caused by errors, misuse, the vast majority of which is accidental. I didn't know I couldn't do that. I didn't know I shouldn't print it out and leave it on the bus. Well, you should have. You were trained. Being attacked is one thing, it does happen, and it's usually a lot worse, but we get a lot of small occurrences, which are down to sort of errors and mistakes. The big tickets, they can do an awful lot of damage if they go wrong, like the target. They're the ones that grab headlines. The small stuff rarely grabs the headlines, but it does happen. And finally, one I always hawk around, just a real simple message I do, and I always leave the puppy on the screen when I exit the building, is to say, look, 20,000 is not a project, 27,000 is not a project. These are not just 3 months' work and then we do an audit and we all go home. Every day we come in, we're saying, right, I need to make sure that the ISMS is as good as it was yesterday, if not better. Continuous improvement, it's got to keep getting better. That's it. Thank you very much.